Todd just sat down with IGN for an interview. It's labeled Todd Howard Talks Elder Scrolls 6 Progress, Starfield PS5, and new updates, and more. I'm guessing this is going to be a video where Todd talks for about 20 minutes about the Starfield updates, how it's completing the vision he always had. When he's asked about Elder Scrolls 6, he's going to say it's coming when it's ready, and there's going to be very, very little about it. And then when it comes to and more, I'm guessing he's going to mention Fallout 76 and the Fallout TV show. I'm guessing this is going to be a nothing burger, but we're going to watch it together anyways. Okay. I've just been conditioned and prepared, to expect less. So let's see. I'm going to sit between them. So it's like Todd is looking at me longingly. Okay. Hey, buddy. Hey, let's talk. Let's do it.
You on the Starfield updates, what's happening with Fallout 76.
It's not at the start. Sorry. Okay.
Since we're on the topic of Elder Scrolls 6, what can you tell me about
Nothing.
Where it's at?
I've never heard of it.
Lessons you've learned from Starfield.
Pretend we never announced it.
IGN's here at Bethesda Game Studios, and I'm with studio head and creative director Todd Howard. Everyone knows you. And it is really nice to catch up with you on the Starfield updates, what's happening with Fallout 76, and everything else with Bethesda Games. So I guess I want to kick things off. Folks know what's up with the Starfield updates now, but take me through how the team got there with thinking of how to update Starfield. The game has changed. We don't do expansion packs necessarily anymore. There's still DLC, but you have intermittent updates and all that. So a lot of quality of life changes, extra quests and all that.
Dude, if I did this interview, I'd be such a troll. Can you just tell me, when you're trying to figure out what to do with the update, like, what are you thinking? What were you thinking? Yeah, just let the line out. Let the line out. See if you get anything hooked and pull it in. You just gotta. Okay, so Todd, when you're trying to find the right idea, you're looking at everything, and you find something that and you're like, this is the right idea. How do you discover that? Like, what gives you the right idea?
So take me through the journey of determining
It's okay. No, Todd.
How to update Starfield since launch.
Yeah, it's a great question because there's so much in the game. There's kind of so much that we could do, so much the team wants to do, so much the fans want. I think as we went into sort of, as we call it, year 2, there were the creations thing and the faction quests with Trackers Alliance that we have been working on and finding out the right way to kind of bundle those together. And then we have all the other features we want to do, from like the Elder gameplay to ship modules to other things. And then we start looking at, well, you could kind of chop that up and release them like this. But, is there a collective way we can kind of do these things as one? And then you have the story with Terran Armada. And that really stemmed from changing the game more in like a meta way, like the way you play it over many, many hours, where it's 10 or 100, as opposed to just having a quest line that you do and then you're done.
I think a frequent topic that comes up in conversation talking about the trajectory of Starfield is how you communicate with your community, giving them what they want, but also doing something that's still true to y'all's vision with Starfield. So how do you balance that when you have millions of players ask for a million different things, but then, you have limitations, you have things that you want to put in. So what's the relationship been like with folks who have stuck with Starfield since launch?
Yeah, look, we've done a whole bunch of updates since launch, but then we clearly have gone through a period where we were kind of quieter as we were putting all this content together, because we felt that, like, there'll be a good time to announce it all at once, but that also, it does kind of feel a little bad for us, where you want to tell them, like, this is what we're doing. But we sort of like, breadcrumbed, hey, we're working on stuff. That only goes so far. Our community wants to know when we're really talking about it, when it's releasing, to make sure those moments for everybody playing are as exciting as possible, as informative as possible. So I guess we're looking at the community too for feedback on, what do you want to hear from us, when, how. It's something we're still, I say we wrestle with it, when to talk about something.
Yeah.
I don't know, Todd. I don't know if I believe that. Like, people have been telling BGS for, like, no joke, like 2 decades, since the era of Oblivion. People have been telling them, you should be more communicative. You should be clearer with what the plan is. You should be more transparent with, like, updates and things like that. And certainly in the wake of Starfield, there was a real craving from the Starfield community for more transparency and more clarity. And they just didn't. Like notably, there was the one thing with where they said, I think it was May of last year, they said, yeah, or March of last year, they were like, yeah, we're going to share more soon. We can't wait for you to see what we've been working on. And then they just said nothing for the rest of the year. That's unacceptable. Sorry, Bublivian, you're right. Bublivian. That's just unacceptable. Like, that's ridiculous. That's insane. So when he's like, yeah, we're still trying to figure it out and trying to find what the community even wants us to say, you know. It's just, I think Todd's thing, it's been made very clear in many interviews. He does not like long marketing cycles. He does not like the eyes on something for a long time before it's ready. He wants to be able to just announce, drop. That's it. Max like 6 months. That's his dream, is to announce and within 6 months the game's out. That's his vision. That's what he likes. And as a result, that means that he goes radio silent, and it's because he wants, when he announces something, for it to be a big moment, for people to get really excited. He wants it to make a big splash, which I understand. But I feel like there's a way to have a big splash while also not leaving your audience to think that the game is abandoned. Because up until like a month and a half, 2 months, well, I guess technically it was November when the leaks of a preview event started happening. There were real questions whether the second expansion was canceled. There were real questions as to whether Bethesda was totally abandoning Starfield, which is a problem if you're allegedly supporting this game for years to come. Like, the fact that people didn't know if this was canceled is bad, you know? So I think they know what the audience wants, what the community wants. I just think they're conflicted because Todd likes to do big splash announcements, which I think worked in 2008 or 2011 or even 2015 to a certain extent. Nowadays, I'm not sure if the same strategy works the same way.
I want to talk about the PS5 port because it's been, at this point, 2.5 years since Starfield's initial launch. So, like, why now? Was it technical limitations? Is there anything you could share on the business side that may have been a hurdle to get to a PS5 port? Granted that, you know, Bethesda is under the Xbox banner.
Sure.
So is there anything you could share in terms of how you finally got to a PS5 port after all this time?
Well, I think after the game came out, it was obviously a question. It was a question in the audience. It was a question for us. We've always wanted to do it. I would say that. We have a great relationship with PlayStation. You know, we've been there for a long time with our games. So I think with this one, we knew it would be a matter of time. We've been working on it for a while. So we still maintained a close relationship. We're still shipping a lot on PlayStation. People forget, like with Fallout 76, the other updates, Skyrim, we're still doing a lot of PlayStation work, even though Starfield wasn't there. So we're just, I tell you what, so excited to get it out there to the audience.
So on the topic,
I do think this is probably one of the last big moments for Xbox bringing exclusive stuff over, because I mean they went 2.5 years before they brought it to PS5. It's fascinating. Starfield really was, it's easy to forget now, but Starfield was the first big game that Xbox had that was going to be totally exclusive, not going to PlayStation, which was a big deal at the time, and it didn't seem to move the needle that much, to the point where then after that Xbox started pushing, you know, everything everywhere. So it's fascinating to see that it took this long to end up on PlayStation. You know, it's very interesting.
The relationship with Xbox and being under that banner, you know, recent changes, drastic changes, you know, with Phil Spencer retiring, Asha Sharma taking over. What can you tell me about your relationship so far with the new leadership? I know Matt Booty's still there, so you're probably still in contact with him a lot, but how are you feeling about this shift in Xbox leadership moving forward?
I hate it. It's terrible.
Well, look, I'm of two minds, right? I'm excited whenever there's new things and where they're going in the future with the hardware. I've known about that for a while and all the plans. I will say I'm sad to see Phil go. You know, he's a good friend. He's one of the key reasons that we've been, you know, a large part of Xbox, not just after like them acquiring us, but even before that. You could see Xbox kind of being our lead platform a lot of the time. And I wish people knew, I've sat in so many meetings watching Phil Spencer and Matt Booty look at games, not just anybody's game, and wanting to protect the creative vision and find a path for success. How do we protect this? How do we make it successful? And I've seen them do that behind closed doors so many times, and I don't think they get the credit for it that they deserve. They're, you know, great game leaders, and Asha's coming in. Everybody thinks so highly of her, so we're excited about the future.
Now, you mentioned something about hardware, so I gotta press you on it. Like, of course, I'm not gonna be getting any answers about what the next console looks like or anything.
I think they were talking about some stuff today, actually.
Yeah. As we're recording this, GDC is happening. I'm seeing things here and there, unfortunately.
Literally like an hour ago.
Yeah. So I'm not there right now because I'm out here. But I guess a more broad question is, as you are in the process of developing Elder Scrolls 6 and you're continuing to update Starfield, what is it about a next gen console do you actually need and or want?
That's a great question. I think, look, we've been fortunate. We see that stuff really, really early.
Yeah.
And it's tricky for, we'll say, console manufacturers, whoever they are. They have to take a very long view of development when you sort of tape out on a chip, how you call that timing and cost, and then what does it look like 5 or 10 years after that. So it's really, really tricky kind of thing to maneuver both technically and business-wise when anyone is making a system like that where you're gonna lock it down. Our approach has always been, and because fortunately we've had such a PC audience, and we're doing it more and more going forward, which is to cast a wide net technically, to both take advantage of the very high end, but allow the game to scale down and handle. You look at handhelds now, you look at how popular those are becoming, and I think you're gonna see more of that in lower powered devices, lower powered where, say you're traveling and you wanna, underclock that thing in a certain way. We want our games to be able to handle that.
Which is interesting because BGS, their games are notoriously CPU bound. So games scale well in terms of GPU stuff because you just lower the resolution, you lower the bells and whistles graphically. CPU bound games, it's a lot trickier to get that scaling, right? Because if you need a certain number of NPC stuff calculated and simulated, physics simulation done on the CPU as opposed to the GPU, if you need all of these things done on the CPU, that's a lot harder to scale because historically, that's where handhelds will start to fall behind. Not just in terms of GPU power, but also in terms of CPU power. It's like the big question with Red Dead 2, is that game seems to be CPU bound more. Red Dead 2, GTA 6, Red Dead 2 also was CPU bound. But that's one of those tricky bits. Is you can have all the graphics power in the world, but if it's CPU bound, it doesn't matter because you're still going to be limited by how fast the CPU can process what's going on. So my understanding, and I spoke to a number of modders when Starfield was fresh about optimizations there, because there was also a debate over whether they were going to be able to get it running at 60 FPS at all. And my understanding is it takes a lot of work to get the creation engine running like that, on lower end hardware. So it's going to be interesting. But yeah, I don't think he's joking when he says they're building everything to scale. I do think that is the future. I think that is what all of these studios are doing. It's not just BGS. I think PlayStation's starting to look at that. There's rumors of them doing a handheld. Of course, on PC, there's all sorts of gaming handhelds, and that's becoming a big point. A lot of people have Steam Decks, and that's where they're playing their PC games, predominantly. And so it matters to them if it can run on Steam Deck or not. So I do think that that's definitely going to be one of the big pushes moving forward.
So I think more than anything, when we look forward, we're less about, we are going to make the game and tie it to this spec, which we would sometimes do in the past, particularly in the 360 area per se, where you might be really constrained. Now they're powerful enough, and you're looking at those different scopes of things where instead of constraining ourselves, we're widening it. Does that make sense?
And so on the question of tech also, we talk about still sticking with creation, creation engine 2 with Starfield, but moving to a third iteration of the engine with Elder Scrolls 6. What are the things that you need out of a third iteration of creation as you are building a new game for it?
Gosh, I don't want to spoil too much. I mean, look, you get your whiz-bang rendering, shiny pixel stuff that everyone would expect. And I think the change to Creation Engine 2 from where we were for Starfield was such an, upheaval for what we were doing. We felt coming out that we could have managed that better. So going into Creation Engine 3, I can't say enough about our tech staff and how they've handled that transition so that we can still be making a game while that is going on. I think it's, again, as we look at future tech, I already mentioned casting a pretty wide net and scaling way up and also down. I think there are things outside of the rendering that you would expect as it comes to data systems, how our worlds load. how they load content and present things of high detail close to the camera without spoiling it, you know? So there's some foundational things that we felt we wanted to do.
If he doesn't mean cutting out the load screens, I don't know what that could possibly be referring to. Like, he's saying they wanted to revisit and tackle how the engine loads things in and everything. Like, he's literally saying loading. So if I swear to God, if the Creation Engine 3 and Elder Scrolls 6 launches with load screens to go into buildings and stuff, it's gonna be crazy, dude. Because again, we're just looking at, like, look at one example from this year, Crimson Desert. Just the previews have blown people's minds, technically speaking. That's only going to be better in 3 years ish, 2 to 3 years, when Elder Scrolls 6 is ready. Like, that's only going to be even crazier. There's going to be even more. We will certainly, by the time Elder Scrolls 6 comes out, we certainly will have had GTA 6 launch. Like, the expectations were already above what the Creation Engine could do back in 2023. And I have felt for a long time, and I've done the MS Paint demonstration on this numerous times, but just to do it again, because why not? I feel like, you know, if this is every other studio's technical capabilities over the years, BGS back in like the probably, I would say, Oblivion era, they were actually above a lot of the competition. But as time has gone by, they've kind of plateaued and they've fallen further and further and further behind. So maybe this crossing point is like 2015. I don't know exactly when it would have been, but if we say like 2015, they were in line with what the industry standards were. Everyone else had pretty much caught up with what they could do, but you know, they were in line with what you would expect. By Fallout 76, significantly behind, or a little behind. By the time of Starfield, there was a pretty big gap. By the time of Elder Scrolls 6, I think it's going to feel even more significant, because you're going to see games like Crimson Desert that are also sort of fantasy with like swords and everything, and they have no problems with loading, and they have no problems with crazy interactivity and graphics and foliage density and water sim, and like they have no restrictions at all. And it's going to be even more difficult to hand wave away like Creation Engine difficulties. But yeah, what he just said makes me think that they're reevaluating like the load screen stuff, and they're going to work on that.
How they load content and present things of high detail close to the camera without spoiling it, you know? So there's some foundational.
So that, how you present things close to the camera with high detail, that to me sounds like DLSS 5. Because bear in mind, when he did this interview was at GDC like a week ago. So DLSS 5 wasn't announced yet. So that to me sounds like he's referring to DLSS 5, high detail close to the camera. But he also specifically mentions loading stuff.
Things that we felt we wanted to do the things we're doing in the future. And then obviously, like I said, all of the sort of graphics rendering things. But I think a lot of gamers, they were reacting what's on the screen as they should, but a lot of people think that is engine. And so like the actual rendering, like the pixel shaders and everything that's happening, that's actually a smaller part of an engine than people think. The engine deals with data structures and loading and AI and save states and platform, like all of these things that go into an engine are far more than just the final frame.
Sure. I guess to a little bit more specific, talking about Starfield.
Yeah, which to be clear is why one of the competitive advantages for Bethesda for a long time was that the Creation Engine could have so many individual instanced objects that have physics applied to them. So as you're exploring an environment in Skyrim, you know, if you find a bread knife on the ground, you can pick it up, add it to your inventory, move it around, put it over here on the table and drop it. You know, that level of interactivity was something their engine could do that a lot of other engines couldn't do. The downside of that is because it's simulating physics for all of that stuff constantly, it's CPU bound, and it also limits the scale of each individual scene. So you can't have just like endless loading everywhere, you know, it just doesn't work that way. So that was for a long time their advantage. Now it's actually kind of become an albatross around their neck though.
With the Free Lanes update, you know, interconnecting planets, kind of broadening the scope between planets. I know that was one of the big criticisms of the original release of Starfield, is that some players felt like there was a lack of exploration in space, and Free Lanes kind of is that answer to that question. Was that like an initial limitation of the tech, or is it just took time to figure out how how to weave those things together. So take me behind a little bit about the technical aspect of creating free lanes for the free lanes update with Starfield.
Yeah, it was interesting. Obviously, you know, if you look at Starfield, I think people who play it know, like when you're in a system, like around a star, all that stuff is there. And we had to make a decision in terms of like, where's the gameplay, right? So you jump into a system, flying through empty space, how much are we making that fun versus where you jump in, and then same thing landing on a planet, how are we making that fun? And so we more sort of made a decision of let's focus on the area you jump in and make that like ship experience the best it could be. But obviously then you have a spaceship, you're like, well, I want to fly to that planet, I want to fly. Let's take that moment of like just even like flying around the moon. And we noticed mods, people doing it, like, well, clearly the game can do it. So we sort of started with, you want in your...
I'm sorry. I love the idea that they're like, can we do that? And then they check to see if a modder has already done it. And they're like, oh, so we can do it. Like, I'm sorry. That's funny. That's really funny. Like, is this possible? Yeah, no, you know, Tom in Nebraska, he did it, you know, in his garage with a box of scraps. So we can probably do it. It's just crazy to me that they like are looking to the modding community for ideas and gauging what is and isn't possible. It's wild.
Spaceship to sort of fly around the planet. And so it was starting there. Like, we're gonna have this mode where you're gonna go fast. And then it was, okay, well, that needs to have some gameplay. You know, what would you expect? And that's where we got into all of the systems that free lanes is. And it still is tricky in finding that balance of, well, it's empty space. If you're running into things all the time, then it doesn't feel like space. It starts feeling like an amusement park of just, there's stuff everywhere.
You know how I bet they're doing this? Because I've been thinking about this. I was like, how did they do that? The problem with the creation engine is at the end of the day, to put it very simply, this is how a modder explained it to me, okay? You start at a coordinate when you load in, and this is with the coordinates of like 0, 0, right? Just think X and Y. You know, technically there's also another dimension, but yeah, you get what I mean. So you start at a very simple spot. And with the creation engine, because of how they use floats and everything, as you get further and further away exploring, you eventually start to break stuff. This is why there were fish bowls where you could only land in one fish bowl, because the further away you got from the origin point, if they had a building over here that was filled with objects and things to discover, it would start to break down because the engine was trying to figure out where items are supposed to be placed inside there, but because of how they compress the numbers for locations and for the physics simulation, everything, it starts to break down. Just like the Farlands in Minecraft back in the day before they fixed it. So you always had this problem that you couldn't get that far from the origin point without having massive problems. So I've been thinking about like, how do they do this with the flight, where you have a ship, you know, that's flying through space, you know, fire, that's flying through space. How do you do this? If this is flying, you know, light years away, it's going to get pretty far away from this origin point, and like physics within the ship is going to start to break down as well. I bet what they're doing as you fly forward, I bet if this is the world around you, they just move the whole world. So like if the moon is here and then you have, you know, Jupiter over here, they just move everything relative to your motion. So your origin point is staying the same. It's the moon and the planets that are moving around you, contextual to you, like you're driving through a tunnel, but you're staying still, but the tunnel's moving down, you know, because then the origin point doesn't change. You can still do stuff within the ship without problems. And who cares if like the balloon of a planet that you're not interacting with, because you still have to load into it by going down. If that does it, you know, if that doesn't need complex physics sim, it's just a ball representation of the planet. I bet that's how they're doing it. Yeah. It's something like a lot of games do. It's actually kind of funny. A lot of elevators in games work that way. The elevator isn't moving up, the whole world is moving down. Because if they try to move up with you, you like clip into the floor, it causes problems. So when you hop in an elevator in a good number of games, the elevator isn't moving up, the whole world is moving down around you, which is just kind of funny. It's all that trickery to get things working that I find fascinating.
So I think team's done great with a system in terms of, you know, the radar beeping and telling you, hey, there's something there to go find. So it's kind of up to you. Dealing with autopilot, it's fun. Actually, I have a lot of fun going into that mode and then getting up. So getting up out of my seat and then the ship is just cruising at, these crazy speeds through space, but I'm still able to we had talked about that. I want to walk around my ship. I want to talk to the other characters. I want to do all these things in that mode. So yeah, it came out well.
One of the things I love picking the brain of people who've worked on RPGs for so long. I had a conversation with Leonard Boyarsky leading up to Outer Worlds 2 about how they think of RPG systems and creating friction for the player. I know, I still say Morrowind is one of my favorite RPGs to this day, because I look back
You can stay.
on how much I had to figure things out for myself. There's a lot of friction that I enjoyed working, but he had some interesting.
This is interesting because I actually agree with him on this. It's refreshing to hear somebody from IGN talking like this in a way that I'm like, thank you. Friction is good. There's got to be some raunchy analogy I could use. Friction is what gives it feeling. There's some way that you could do that. I'll let you fill in the blanks. But I do think it's true that games that are too polished and too streamlined and holding your hand lose any sense of actually being played. You're not figuring anything out. You're just going through the motions, Yeah, I mean, we've all played the games where you go through and it's okay, here, walk over and grab this item off the desk. You go there. And walk over, bring it to this character. You bring it there. And then go over there and talk to this person. Okay. And go over there and do this. Okay. And so you're just going through the motions. You're not actually playing anything. You're just doing what you need to do. When you have a game that challenges you to figure it out, assuming the systems are robust and are willing to handle that load, that can make your experience way, way better. KCD is a great example where KCD, when you first play it, there's a lot of friction. It's difficult to figure out, how do I even play this game for 10 hours? What am I even going to do? But once you figure it out, it's amazing. Super, super immersive, because you're okay, I just did this quest. I'm going to take a quick detour on my way back to Kutenberg. I'm going to go do some hunting, get some meat. I'm going to go back, make some food. Okay. Oh, well, while I'm doing that, I'm going to dry some stuff over here, and might as well brew a couple potions because I want to save while I'm out exploring later. Okay, I'm going to do that. And then I also, I got some inventory stuff. I'm going to go sell it. You start to get the gameplay loop, and it starts to make sense. Maybe Crimson Desert 2. Based on my preview, I talked about this after the preview, that there's plenty of instances where that game does not hold your hand at all. Once you figure it out, though, it's really cool. For example, when I did the call with Jor Raptor, we did our podcast and we were talking about it, and Jor was it's really frustrating how I needed to use this force palm ability that relies on in games. It's basically kind of like mana. It's spirit is what I think they call it. But you needed that to use a force palm ability to do a puzzle. And he was it's frustrating because you run out, and then I just had to stand around and wait for it to refill. And I told him oh no, actually you can go into focus mode by pressing down both of the thumbsticks, and he goes into focus mode and it fills up super fast. And Jor's oh, that's awesome. That helps. That's cool. But he didn't realize that, or missed the tutorial prompt, or forgot about it, whatever. And so he, the game was more difficult for him than it needed to be. But once he figured that out, it was oh, and it rewards you for figuring it out, But I think he's right that those frictions can really add to the overall experience when you're figuring things out.
To this day, because I look back on how much I had to figure things out for myself. There's a lot of friction that I enjoyed working, but he had some interesting answers, and I kind of want to throw that question to you as well, especially as you continue to work on big RPGs that you want to appeal to a broad audience. But Bethesda does have that history of letting players be free in this world and determining their what happens with choice and consequence. So as you are building new games, you're still thinking of how to revolutionize the genre. How are you thinking about choice and consequence and creating friction for players in a way that is still enjoyable for a broad audience?
That's a good question. I don't know that I agree with the word friction. I think it depends on the definition. I think it's choices that are interesting, where you chose one path over another. And that can also just be in a character system, how you develop a character. Who do you want to be out of the gate? I think Starfield, take that as an example compared to what we've had before with the backgrounds, and hey, you're going to start with these skills, and you sort of come out and say, hey, this is the character I want to role play. And so there's a pretty healthy debate here, I'll say, with no right or wrong answer, in terms of to have a different experience, to make a different character at what point should you start over? And I think that's where you can maybe get into some friction. Where Oblivion, because it's remastered.
I mean, I feel like he's talking more about systems in general. He's pivoting to like characters, and so I feel like Todd's answering a different question. But
when you play it again, it's a very clear game where you a couple hours in, you're like, I think I chose wrong. And after Oblivion, I felt very strongly, I was seeing that a lot and thinking, I don't want that in my games. I don't want someone to be like, I made a mistake several hours ago and I have no way of correcting it, which is also why you see sort of the Skyrim system of, hey, you come out, you don't really pick a class. And even in Starfield or Fallout, you're sort of picking a starting point, but you can go in any direction. So if you feel you've made a mistake, you can still correct. There are other ways to do that also where you get some scarcity, right? In that Starfield is a game with a character system where you can eventually, it's long, you can eventually get it all. Whereas you look at a 76 with cards, there's a scarcity. A lot of games, you know, RPGs in particular, I think there are games out there do quite a good job with like the scarcity of builds.
Earlier, you were mentioning, you know, time from announcement to actual release and how that's like something.
He's deflecting. Well, no developer wants to say, yeah, we have a lot of friction in our game because it sounds bad. I get what he was asking though. Like he's asking effectively, like, how do you balance wanting to make your game accessible to more people while also trying to avoid dumbing it down so you lose the hardcore fans that like gameplay depth, complexity, and maybe some more unforgiving systems that are not trying to hold your hand, that are not trying to be forgiving by letting you respec or letting you change this or that. How do you balance appealing to new, more casual players who don't like that depth and maybe that scares them away or turns them off? And how do you balance that with the hardcore players that are playing pretty much exclusively because of that depth? And I think Todd was more answering like he hears friction. He thinks players giving up because the game is unforgiving in one way or another. So Todd pivoted to a different question, I think, but I think it was a good question from the IGN guy. Todd just answered a different one.
You're a little bit more conscious of now. You know, talk about the Elder Scrolls 6 reveal.
Just pretend we didn't announce it.
Yeah. And
it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I remember talking to you.
No one's heard a word.
And in 2019, last time I talked to you, like Starfield was still a ways out. As imminent as it may have felt, you know, various factors happened between then and now. How do you feel about that now? Are you a little bit more conscious of what you share at what time?
Very much.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think, you know, I like to say I always start with when you go and press play, you're about to play a game, like what do you already know? What's in your head? What's your excitement level? What's your expectations? And I kind of back up from there. I prefer not to talk about stuff until I like to compress that moment, right? Where you hear about a game and you can play it. Those will be on top of each other if I had my way every time. That isn't like necessarily the best thing to do with every game. Sometimes you need to inform people and there's business considerations and et cetera, et cetera. You know, if you look back at...
I think it's pretty clear they announced it when they did, how they did, because of the ZeniMax acquisition. It's pretty clear. I don't think that was Phil's choice. I think that was clearly like Robert Altman called him and said, hey, we need to sell the company. We got to release or announce everything we've got to really excite a buyer. So I need you to announce all of this in 2018. And so I don't think it was Todd's choice. I think he's mentioned 1,000 times how he's perturbed by how that went and he wishes they hadn't announced it.
This Fallout
Thank you,
76,
Alexander.
Starfield, Elder Scrolls 6 announcement.
For the sub, thank you.
You know, that was really around informing our audience because when you're gonna do something new, everyone's gonna ask, like, what about Elder Scrolls 6? What about a single player game? And you know, we did it that way, but it's not my preference. I will say, look, we struggle with the balance because, you know, our fans wanna know, they're amazing and saying like, well, what are you doing? And so, well, I think they'd like to know, like, we're working on a lot of stuff. I think if you look at the scale of our studio, we could have 10 times the amount of people to do all this. We're doing so much, and it's just finding the right times to tell everybody about it. You look at Starfield today. I feel like the Starfield audience has been, what about us? You know, and we had sort of balance with like, hey, the end of the fall was like a Fallout, the TV show, everything we were doing, and we knew like, hey, we're just gonna save the Starfield stuff to give it its spotlight during this time.
We also talked about earlier the way Bethesda kind of scales as a project goes on, and juxtaposing that with the many stories about AAA development being very long and being very expensive. And when people look at, you know, as we mentioned, your time from announcement to release, it looks like that is such a long and expensive process. But you mentioned the way Bethesda scales it from pre-production to full production, and how that's, you know, maybe it's a works for you guys within your scope. So can you, for the audience out there, kind of take us behind the scenes of how you're able to manage those kind of AAA expectations and some of your thoughts about how that has happened outside of Bethesda?
Yeah, for us, look, we've been fortunate that, all the games that we've done, have had big audiences, and many of them still have big audiences. So our prime job is always serving the millions of people currently playing a game. And when we start a new game, we're usually going to start smaller, and we can have pre-productions. We'll call it for like 2 years, sometimes 3 years, with a smaller staff to make sure we know what we're doing before we put a lot of people on it. That might be not wasting time, but doing work where everybody feels this might get redone. Some of that is necessary when you're making a new game, particularly a new IP. Like, some of this work is going to get redone. We sort of want to minimize that, do enough of that. And then once we have some runway, we've been fortunate to sort of balance. And then, a lot of the team members and our partners outside are coming onto a game. Like, we're at that point with Elder Scrolls 6, where the bulk of the studio is on it. A lot of our partners are on it, and we know, hey, this is what we're doing. So that's a good place to get to. But a game like Fallout 76 going into a 67th update, full team on that. So when you have these very popular kind of live games, that's new for us, having it to that scale and balancing amongst that. We're in a good spot now, but that's been sort of trickier for us these last few years to maneuver.
Since we're on the topic of Elder Scrolls 6, what can you tell me?
I mean, obviously there's only so much he can say, it's I admire the effort in asking
About
Nothing.
where it's at.
I've never heard of it.
Lessons you've learned from Starfield.
Pretend we never announced it.
From the lessons you learned in Starfield and how that's carrying over to Elder Scrolls 6. I know we asked that earlier,
Fair.
but due diligence
That's
and
a
all
fair
that.
question.
Yeah.
You should ask.
Yes.
I'll say what I say up there, because it's sort of I want to be careful what I say about Elder Scrolls 6 too, because I think everybody wants to know.
He said, I'll say what I said up there. I'm guessing, I don't know this for a fact. I'm guessing, because I've been to these types of events and then doing interviews after the fact. And a lot of time, like there'll be a little slip where they say something like that. It's just to give you a little behind the scenes. Usually at these events, you have like an initial demonstration or they'll do like a presentation in a theater space where they show you like, okay, this is what we're doing today. Each of the game designers comes up, gives a 5-minute spiel about what they're going to show, and today you're going to see Starfield, and we're going to show you this, and this, and I'm the head of gameplay, and this is what I'm doing. So I'm guessing Todd's referencing up there, they went into like a conference room or a theater and gave a keynote, and that's what he's referencing. But just to give you a little background, when he says quickly, I'll say what I said up there, I think that's what he's referring to. I find that funny to be like, oh, I think I see that.
I want to be careful what I say about Elder Scrolls 6 too, because I think everybody wants to know, and we want to find a time, obviously, that we'll talk about that in depth. But the one thing I'd say is really the tech. As we're going to Creation Engine 3, again, the team has done a really incredible job at like not just pushing what it is, but how it's integrated into our development cycle. So you don't feel that what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, like the game goes down. So we're in a fortunate position where that's a game where, the builds are really consistently working every day. Not every day, but more days than we've ever had, where the build is good, new stuff is in it, we can play it. And when you're making those kind of technical changes we talked about, often you're pulling the rug out from the team we're making content. Be like, okay, that doesn't work for this period of time. You have to wait till we get that working again. And we've done a really good job of managing that on this. And Starfield, we struggled there for a number of years in terms of when we went through the engine change.
Yeah. Massive update for Starfield.
Yeah, Todd's smart. Todd knows the eyes are on like loading screens. Todd knows if he can get on stage and say, once you load into the game, there are no load screens in exploration, full stop. He knows that gets like a standing ovation, even though that's kind of like a no-duh with a lot of other open world games. He knows for him and for Elder Scrolls 6, that would be like major selling point. So I think he knows what the assignment is. I also find it fascinating that now they are going with the buzzword Creation Engine 3, Creation Engine 3, Creation Engine 3. Because bear in mind, just like a year and a half ago, when they were asked about Elder Scrolls 6, He said, we're working on it, but it is going to be built with the same engine that we used with Starfield. That was the phrasing. We're building on the tech we used for Starfield. And so it was understood that it was using Creation Engine 2. But I think they realized we need to do like an actual rebranding. Because when most people, and you better believe they're doing surveys, they've got polls and data collected. When they look at it, I'm sure one of the number one complaints about Starfield was the tech, was the engine. When people say, what's causing you hesitancy with Elder Scrolls 6, they know it's the engine. So they understand, like that's the big hurdle they have to overcome. There's lots of excitement and hype even around Elder Scrolls 6. They just have to remove some of those barriers. That's the big thing to overcome. That's probably the hardest too.
Field, I imagine there's still more ideas in the works, and the roadmap is going to be longer with for the Starfield audience. So after this big update, what are you thinking for Starfield's future?
I could just say there's going to be more, right? Just like this process of here's all the things we want to do.
Okay.
Some of those may come out on their own. Some of those may be bundled together in a moment, but we have a list of what we're doing after this. We're excited about it just as well. So just also want to say thanks, and thanks to our Starfield audience out there who's just given us so much great feedback, and the millions playing it. We're just really, really fortunate with a new game like this.
Okay, so they're not done. They're not done. The rumors were wrong. At least as of right now, he's saying they're not done.
If you want to catch up on everything that's happening over at Bethesda and Starfield and a little bit of Elder Scrolls 6, stick.
Well, there you go. I am genuinely so interested in how this update does on like Steam and how it does on all the platforms. I'm so curious. I'm so curious. Because I just genuinely don't know. Yeah, I'm very curious. Oh, Kiwi just linked his interviews talking about Todd's retirement. I think we've looked at this actually previously. But yeah, you should go watch Kiwi Talks' page. He does really good stuff. Either way, there you go. Not much. Kind of like I expected. A bit of a nothing burger, but that's fine.